So I'm in Carmel today, and people ask me often, why don't you live in Carmel? And the number one reason why I don't live in Carmel, or my family, is because the location just doesn't work. We could make it work, but it affects our day-to-day so much. Just to be too much driving, too much hectic, and we don't want that. But we would absolutely live in Carmel. And so in this video, I'm gonna talk about the 5 reasons why I, or my family, would absolutely live here. And they might match up with your reasons, they might not. So just gonna go through what our preferences might be. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with Living in Indianapolis channel. Welcome back. If it's your first time, welcome to you as well. So Carmel again here. And we all know that this is a really highly rated place to live, and the reasons that I would absolutely live here could be a little different than yours. They could be reasons that you wouldn't want to live here, whatever that might be. Everybody has their own opinion for sure, but I've got 5 reasons why we absolutely would. And to be honest with you, Carmel isn't the only place that nails all 5 of these reasons. There are some others that can do the same too, but when I'm talking to people about Carmel, this is usually the list that comes up. So, number 1, we have a family, and schools are important to us. And right now, I'm out here in front of the public library, which is, for a public library, it's pretty incredible. Downtown Carmel is right over here just to my west, so you can see the sign for the Arts and Design District, but Carmel High School is right across the street. So this campus is huge, and for a high school, giant, but really highly rated. And so having a family, it's important for us to be in a school district that is really highly rated, and you get a lot of opportunity here. Now, I will say Carmel is big, really big. So there's a little over 100,000 people in Carmel, and it has 1 high school. And there's about 5,300 kids at this high school. And that's mostly in person. So if you look across the entire country at rankings and school sizes, Carmel is usually up there in the top 10. And some of those other schools in the top 10, they have a lot of virtual students. So a lot of those kids aren't on campus. But this one here, most of these kids are on campus. There's some virtual, but thousands on campus here. And so when school starts and when school ends, there's a lot of traffic through here. And of course, at the beginning of the day, a lot of people descending on this particular area. Now there's a big parking lot way over on the north side of the school here, and some other opportunities for parking here and there, and of course right on campus too. But then the buses coming in and out, it's pretty crowded. And given that it's that big, you get a lot of opportunity and a lot of variety for things through the school, which is super cool. But negative to that would be that it's pretty competitive. So we have kids that are in sports, we have kids that are in music, and to get into some of those programs or teams, they're not going to take everybody, unfortunately, and you might just face a little bit of competitiveness with some of those things, but that's okay. It's still super highly rated, it's still a highly desirable place, and even if you don't have kids in school, it's still something I know that it's on a lot of people's minds because they want to live in a highly desirable area, and Carmel is, for a lot of reasons, but schools are certainly one of those things. Now, it's important to us to have a highly rated public school system because we are sending our kids now, not through Carmel, but through public schools. I used to be a public school science teacher at Westfield High School for 16 years. So I'm a public school kind of guy, but there are plenty of people now that are turning to homeschool. That's becoming a lot more popular, and that's fantastic too. Some people turn to private school, and that's fantastic as well. And you're going to have some choices for private school through Carmel. There's Guerin Catholic, Park Tudor, which would be much further south. That's also an option. You've got Brebeuf on the north side of Indianapolis. You've got University High School over on the west side of Carmel. So there are some private school options. It's just a lot of times when you get into a private school options, they are tied to a religion of some kind. And if that's not your religion, then it might be difficult for you to get into that school because you're not a member of maybe the church there, or it's just not your religion. So finding a non-secular school can be a little bit more difficult, or you might have to have a little bit more effort to get to it. So like I said with Park Tudor, that's down in the Broad Ripple area and it's a little bit more of a drive. But you could certainly go to University High School or something like that too. So there are some options, but the schools having that for our own kids, or just the value of your home in that particular city, is important to us, and it's important, I know, to a lot of people. So that's the first point. It may not necessarily be the number one point, but it's always going to rank up there pretty high. Another reason I really like Carmel, and this isn't the only place that is like this, but I think if you're from some other place in the country and you're not used to this, it can be, I don't even know how to describe it. For some, it's a little bit of a shock. It's almost unnerving, or what am I missing here? Is that Carmel is really, really clean. So pretty big city, again, a little over 100,000 people, covers a pretty large geographic area too. A lot of miles, especially going east-west. North-south, not as much, maybe 7 miles or so from southern border to the northern border, but it's clean. And people ask, well, we're really eyeing Carmel, but is there any place we should really avoid in Carmel? So if you're asking, hey, is there a spot where the crime is rampant, especially violent crime or something like that? No, it's exceptionally low, and it's just clean about everywhere. It's really a nice looking place. Now it has newer sections and older sections. So if you get into, let's say, some of the older sections, you might not think it's as neatly put together. But if you're really looking, it's still pretty clean. The houses, there aren't that many just run down home after home after home. The streets themselves, they're in really pretty good condition. There isn't a bunch of trash around. It's just very, very clean. And so I think when you've never been to a place like that before, and you could live in a city, because there are lots of cities like that across the country, but if you've never actually been in that, and if you were in Indianapolis, there are a lot of parts of Indianapolis that are very clean, but then there's some just a little bit more run down parts. And if you live in those, and I've actually lived in some of those areas in the past, and it's just kind of part of living in the city. It never bothered me any. It didn't cause any harm. But when you come to a place like this and you just really don't have that anywhere, it can be a little bit jarring or unnerving, and that question of, what am I missing here? I can understand why that might come up, but living in a place like this where it's just exceptionally clean everywhere, pretty much all year long, that just feels good to me. I like that. This reason is one of the reasons that on a day-to-day basis I get the most excited about. And it's not just in Carmel, but it's kind of spilled out all over the place. And I'm coming up to a place where it's a really good example, but the infrastructure, and that includes the roundabouts in Carmel. I really don't care what people say about roundabouts and, oh, I hate these roundabouts and dealing with these things. There are all kinds of different styles of roundabouts, and you have to learn to navigate them. But if you didn't have them, things would be really different. So you had lots of people complaining about the growth of Carmel. It's 100,000 people now, and the traffic. All right, well, I do remember 20 and 25 years ago when it was actually much smaller, but the traffic it really was worse. So the thing about Carmel is that it's not only a fairly large-sized city by itself, but it has Indianapolis to the south, it has Westfield to the north, it has Zionsville to the west, and it has Fishers to the east. And those are relatively big. So Westfield is growing, it's pushing 60,000 people. Even Noblesville to the northeast, it's 80-ish thousand, a little over 80,000 people or so. Indianapolis, you've got over 900,000 people, and Fishers is actually a little larger than Carmel. at just over 100,000 people, a little bit larger. And so it's surrounded by a lot of people and a lot of traffic, and there's a lot of transient traffic that goes through Carmel all of the time. And going to Westfield, where I lived in Indianapolis and I went to Westfield for work, and where I lived, I had to take US 31 to the north, and oh my gosh, or to the south, and it could get really backed up at a lot of the stoplights. So they had to get ahead of that, and the way that they did is by removing the stoplights. So US 31, Keystone Parkway, Hazeldale, these are awesome north-south arteries going through Carmel. You don't even have to stop. You just go right through, but you can get off anywhere you want. And then a lot of the other north-south roads that are smaller, and then all of these east-west roads, removing stoplights and putting in roundabouts to keep the traffic moving. Does it ever back up at a roundabout? Well, for sure it does. But how long do you realistically wait there at one of those for the cars to go through? Realistically, you don't wait that much time. Certainly a lot less than sitting at a stoplight backed up completely for who knows how far and who knows how long. Even in that case, realistically, you're truly not waiting very long, but a roundabout is much smaller. So I've got other videos about roundabouts and the benefits of roundabouts. It's just that you will hear some chatter, you'll see comments about people who can't stand them, and you could be one of those. But usually people that leave bad comments about roundabouts, they're the people that leave one-star reviews on Amazon, and they usually leave a one-star review because they can't open the box. It's not any fault of the company or the product. One-star reviews hold no weight when you're trying to figure out if something is good or not. You can live in that 3 to 4 range. That's usually where people are being really honest about whatever product or service it is. Usually, and even the 5s too. They might have had just a great service. But anyway, with the roundabouts, this one here, I'm not in Carmel anymore. I'm actually in Indianapolis, and this intersection has been notorious for Northsiders, especially on the east side, for a long time. I'm at 96th Street, that's going this direction, and then this is Allisonville Road going to the north. I remember when this was just a 4-way, so you had east, west, north, south, and a stoplight right here. You could have traffic backed up, if I look around this corner, to the south into Castleton. So this is where Castleton Square Mall would be, and tons of shopping, and 465 off Allisonville Road is all down that direction. You could have traffic backed up for at least a mile right here because people would be trying to turn left to go west on 96th Street or keep going north into Fishers. Nightmare here. So the solution was, let's just restructure the intersection and let's not let anybody turn left here to try to get the traffic to flow through. So they put in Michigan lefts or Detroit lefts. And if you're not from this area, that is a terminology for an intersection you find in Michigan, I guess. That's where it comes from because they're supposed to be fairly prevalent in a lot of places in Michigan. I've been all over Michigan, but I don't remember seeing that many of these intersections. But what you would do to take a left here, so if you're going north on Allisonville and take a left, you have to go through this intersection to the next stoplight, and there'll be a lane for you that allows you to make a U-turn. So then you U-turn it, come back to this intersection and make a right. So it eliminates all the left-hand turns and makes it only right-hand turns. So that helps traffic get through the intersection maybe a little bit better until that U-turn lane gets a little bit backed up, which it did from time to time. Scrap that, and now we've got this brand new, this will date this video some because this thing just opened 2 weeks ago where traffic can go through here and utilize the entire roundabout. But Carmel's infrastructure and kind of leading the way has spilled over all over the place. Fishers has a lot, Indianapolis has a lot. Where we live, way east in Greenfield, not way east, but east of Indianapolis in Greenfield, there's a lot of roundabouts there. You go over to the west side, there are a lot of roundabouts there. You go into Greenwood, there are roundabouts there. And they have different shapes, different sizes, but you will have people that go through it quite confused. Give them some grace. They may not be from here. They may not encounter that many roundabouts. Just be aware of them and let them go through. There's no need for raging or being angry about it. The good part is that you're all making it through and you're not stopping. You can literally go, so just to my west, get over the White River, you're in Carmel. You can literally go from the east side of Carmel to the west side of Carmel without stopping, ever. You can go from the south to the north in Carmel, almost on the west side or the east side, wherever you pick, almost anywhere you pick, without stopping. So Carmel, 100,000 people, I think they're down to maybe just over 10 stoplights at this point. So I'll have a quiz for you. What other city in the United States has just over 100,000 people and just over 10 stoplights? Here's the answer. There isn't one. Carmel's the only one. So I'm back in the car now, and if you live anywhere in Carmel, I think you'd experience this if you had to, is that the proximity of Carmel to everything is also pretty advantageous. Now, there are other cities that you could have that in their whatever metro they're in all across the country. Carmel just happens to be one of those. So you have Indianapolis just to the south, and you have Westfield just to the north. You got Fishers just to the east, and Zionsville just to the west. So it's surrounded by, Zionsville's a town, but the others are cities. All of these other cities with their own personality, their own things to do, just their own pieces of uniqueness that you may want to take advantage of every now and then. So just as an example, Fishers Amphitheater there, the Nickel Plate District and the Nickel Plate Amphitheater, I mean, it is so cool. And the concerts that they put on there. If you live in Carmel, you may want to come over to Fishers to do that. And it's, depending on where you are in Carmel, it's probably going to be a 20-minute drive, maybe sometimes less than that, maybe a shade over that. Just not that bad. And the traffic in getting there, and of course, right when you're there and you're descending on one spot and there's, let's say, 3,000 people, a lot of people walk to it though, that's probably where you're going to be delayed the most and just trying to find a spot to park. But if you wanted to go to Westfield for any reason, and there could be lots of reasons to go to Westfield, let's say Grand Park, just as an example, our kids play sports and we sometimes have tournaments at Grand Park, so you're really close to that. And you don't have to live in Carmel even to enjoy Carmel. I think that can be a little bit confusing until people get here and think, oh, actually, Carmel's really central and it's pretty easy to get to it if I wanted to be there. So even if it's not the end-all be-all for you, you think, oh, I'd rather live in Noblesville, or Noblesville's more affordable than Carmel and I've got more choices there, I can get more house. You're still not cut off from Carmel, which is really super cool. I mean, even us living in Greenfield, it's a longer drive. It's going to be a solid 30-minute drive for us, but we'll still come to Carmel for maybe a restaurant, something like that, dinner. We have family, friends, or the Palladium, something like that, where you see a show. I mean, there are lots of reasons to be there, and you don't have to live there. So I do like that central, it's not central Indianapolis, but it's at least central-ish to a lot of the population and what a lot of the population likes to do around Indianapolis. And the other point that I like about Carmel and why I would absolutely live there is it is its own city on its own. In other words, it doesn't necessarily really need another city around it. It doesn't depend on it so much. Now, there's a limit to that, of course. So a good example would be, let's see, Republic Airways. Well, Republic Airways, their headquarters, their brand new headquarters at least, is in Carmel. And that's where their corporate center is, their training facility. Republic Airways is an airline. It's a super popular one in Indianapolis, but it probably wouldn't be in Carmel if Indianapolis International Airport wasn't there. So I'm not talking about that kind of dependency, but the stuff that could affect you though. I mean, there's 1,900 jobs or so at that particular facility. So you might be working for them. And there are other companies and hospital systems and things where it is really intertwined. So Carmel can't exist necessarily on its own in that respect, but in your day-to-day. So if you need restaurants, if you need grocery stores, if you need major commercial things like Target or Home Depot, Lowe's, that sort of stuff, it has all of that. You don't have to really go anywhere else to get that kind of thing. So that's an advantage, but some people don't want that. Well, just as an example with us living on the east side in Greenfield, reasonable sized city, 25-ish thousand people or so, and it has quite a bit, but it's lacking some things. So we have to go from there somewhere else to get that. And it's a balance of lifestyle. So we still really like that small city and not exactly super rural, but kind of on the edge of it and just the feel of that. So advantage to have that feel. Disadvantage is that you don't have everything just right around you. So Carmel may not be for you if you like that kind of feel, because everywhere you go in Carmel, it's going to feel at least suburban dense. And there'll be people, there'll be traffic, that kind of thing. Even though, like I said, the traffic, it's not that bad for how many people coming through here. With the people who live here and all the transient traffic, handles it really well, but it still might be too much for you, too much energy. However, if you like that and you want everything pretty close to you, well, Carmel's pretty sweet for that. It's not the only city, of course, in the entire country that's like that. In fact, even here in Indiana, I mean, Fishers can exist just fine on its own. Westfield could exist just fine on its own. Noblesville could exist just fine on its own because it has all of those things too. It's just Carmel's in that mix. And having to leave Carmel for something else would just be really a choice, because let's say you want to do that concert in Fishers. You're going to have to leave Carmel to do that. But Carmel's going to have just about everything else that you possibly can need. Parks as well. I'm right here at Founders Park, and Carmel has a phenomenal park system. So outside of just even all of the corporate stuff, and where can I bring my kids to do some things? Or if you just want to come here and walk on some of the trails, because there's some pretty cool trails going around this pond that you can't really see on the camera right now, and just do that kind of thing for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, or go for a run, something like that. Carmel's going to have all of those things, all of them. And getting familiar with all of these places is sometimes a little bit difficult to do. So that's one of the things that we do. We can help you get familiar by essentially setting up an exploratory itinerary for you, places that you need to go and visit, so you know a place like Carmel or any of the cities that surround Indianapolis, including Indianapolis itself. So you know that they exist, whether they're hugely significant or not. It's just the fact that they're there, and it gives you a sense of the personality of the city, and it also helps to frame your own impression of it and eventually develop your preferences for where you want to be. So Carmel is absolutely a place I would want to be. I know my wife would be absolutely fine living, but the location would have to work. And there are other reasons, positive ones, to really live here, but those are the 5 that kind of top out my list. So if you have questions about Carmel at all, or any of the other places that surround Indianapolis, including Indy itself, then reach out any way that you know how, and we'll catch you in the next one.